The lights of the View studio shimmered across the polished table as the audience settled in. It felt like any other morning segment. Laughter, applause, easy smiles. Sunny Hostin, sharp and confident, took her place at the center. The producers whispered, "We're live in 5." Cameras rolled. Then a murmur swept through the crowd. Denzel Washington stepped onto the stage. Calm, elegant, but with that unmistakable presence that could freeze a room. The applause thundered, but there was a subtle tension underneath, something unsaid. Sunny greeted him warmly at first, her smile measured. They talked about his latest film, his legacy, his faith. It was smooth, polished, until she leaned forward and asked, "Denzel, you've spoken before about personal responsibility, about choices. Don't you think that kind of thinking overlooks systemic problems, especially for Black Americans today?" The air shifted. Denzel didn't blink. He looked at her, not with anger, but with something deeper. "I think truth gets lost," he said quietly, "when people start arguing who's to blame instead of asking what can be done." The table fell silent. The camera zoomed in on Sunny's face, unreadable, and then, just as the applause began to fade, Denzel leaned closer. His tone sharpened. "What you're really asking," he said, "is whether truth still matters." The room froze. What he said next would change everything. The silence felt heavier than words. Sunny straightened in her chair, her professional poise unshaken, but her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "So you're saying people shouldn't question the system?" she asked, her tone calm but edged. Denzel didn't flinch. "I'm saying," he replied slowly, "that if you wait for the system to save you, you'll be waiting your whole life." The audience murmured, half nodding, half uneasy. The air buzzed with tension. Sunny leaned forward, refusing to yield. "That's easy to say when you've made it," she countered. "Not everyone gets to walk in your shoes, Denzel." He smiled faintly, not dismissive, but knowing. "And maybe," he said, "that's the problem. Everyone's too busy looking at someone else's shoes instead of learning how to walk in their own." The crowd reacted, a sharp mix of gasps and applause. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the storm brewing. Cameras cut close. Sunny's jaw tight, Denzel calm, composed. Then unexpectedly, Denzel's tone softened. "You know," he said, "I used to believe what you're saying, until something happened to me." The table went still. Sunny blinked, curious now. "What happened?" she asked. Denzel looked down for a moment, gathering himself, and then he said it. Something no one in that studio was prepared to hear. The room seemed to shrink around Denzel as his voice dropped lower, steadier. "When I was a teenager," he began, "I was on the edge, real trouble. My friends were heading down the wrong road, and I wasn't far behind. One day, an older man pulled me aside. He didn't blame the government. He didn't blame society. He looked me in the eye and said, 'Son, your life changes when you decide it does.'" The studio fell completely silent. Even Sunny didn't move. Denzel continued, his tone almost reverent. "That moment saved me. Not because the world was fair, it wasn't, but because I stopped waiting for it to be fair. I took responsibility and everything changed." Sunny tried to interject, voice trembling just a bit. "But Denzel, that's your story. Most people don't get that kind of chance." He cut in gently but firmly. "Everyone gets a moment. The question is, will you see it or blame someone else for missing it?" A quiet gasp rippled through the audience. Sunny sat back, the words hanging heavy in the air. Then she leaned forward, eyes sharp again. "That sounds nice, Denzel," she said, "but it's still a little out of touch." The crowd reacted. Denzel's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. And in that instant, everyone knew she'd crossed the line. A low hum spread through the studio, that mix of disbelief and anticipation right before something big happens. Denzel didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His silence carried weight. He leaned slightly towards Sunny, his tone measured but piercing. "Out of touch?" he repeated. "Maybe truth sounds out of touch when you've been out of truth too long." The words hit like a thunderclap. The audience erupted, were half cheering, half stunned into silence. Whoopi raised her hands, trying to calm the crowd. Cameras zoomed in on Sunny's face, her confidence shaken, eyes darting as she tried to regain her footing. Denzel sat back, composed, almost solemn. "You see," he continued, "it's not about being rich or famous. It's about choices. Every one of us wakes up with two, complain about what's wrong or do something right." Sunny opened her mouth to respond, but the sound of the audience drowned her out. The energy in the room had shifted, completely. Even the hosts looked unsure what to say. Denzel's calm was unnerving, powerful. He wasn't performing, he was teaching, and then, just as the moment seemed to settle, he leaned forward one last time, eyes steady on Sunny. "I'll tell you something," he said quietly, "that they'll never teach on this show." The audience held its breath. Denzel's gaze didn't waver. Every camera, every light seemed to bend toward him. "They'll teach you how to argue," he said slowly, "how to win a headline, how to sound right. But they won't teach you how to listen, because listening means you might have to change." The words hung in the air like smoke. The audience went silent, truly silent. No murmurs, no applause, just the sound of truth echoing in the stillness. Sunny's expression softened. Whatever fire she came in with was replaced by something quieter, reflection. "So what do we do then?" she asked, voice low, almost vulnerable. Denzel looked around the table, then straight into the camera. "We start talking to each other again. Not as enemies, not as sides, but as people. That's how change begins, not on TV, but in here." He tapped his chest. The audience broke into applause, loud, emotional, sustained. Whoopi smiled faintly, eyes glistening. When the noise finally faded, Denzel nodded once, humble and composed. "That's all I came here to say." The segment ended, but the moment didn't. Social media would explode, pundits would argue. Headlines would twist it all, but everyone who watched that day knew. They had witnessed something real, and the question lingered. Was Denzel right? Or were we just not ready to hear him? If you felt that moment, that electric silence when truth cut through the noise, then you know this was more than just a talk show clash. This was a cultural mirror. Denzel Washington didn't just speak to Sunny Hostin, he spoke to all of us. About accountability, about truth, about what it means to stand firm when the world demands you bend. But here's the thing. Conversations like this are rare. They get buried under outrage, filtered through headlines, and forgotten by next week. That's why we're here, to keep them alive, to dive deeper, question harder, and bring you the moments that mainstream media won't show in full. So if you believe in real dialogue, not scripted noise, hit that like button. If you think truth deserves a platform, comment below with your thoughts. And if you're ready for more unfiltered breakdowns, celebrity confrontations, and cultural deep dives, then don't just watch, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story isn't over. The next moment that shakes Hollywood, politics, or culture could drop any day. And when it does, we'll be right here, breaking it down, frame by frame.